Welcome everyone. Parsha de Shavua. This week we're learning Parsha Yitro and the Ten Commandments. Brought to you live streamed and then archived on Be There Israel and the Or Chadash website and blog and YouTube station. Please tell your friends. Okay, so we'll start at the beginning of Parsha Yitro. And I want to mention at this point, we'll call it a free plug, I think I have permission, is for those people who are following the class on a somewhat weekly basis. So some weeks I use the material in my book Orchard of Delights, though I always will add to it. Some weeks I don't use it at all. This week, I'm using it almost extensively, but in a completely different combination than what appears in the book. So for all of you who have the book, and this is the free plug, if you don't have the book, Orchard of Delights. Yeah, right. If you like this class, you should really get the book. You can get it online. So, for those who have the book, you'll see that a lot of the material I'm giving over is in the book, but it's with a completely different point to it. I'm kind of like shuffling the cards. So we're going to start with the first Rashi on the Parsha. The entire Parsha is really made up of two incidences. Is Yitro, the father-in-law of Moshe, meets Bnei Yisrael as they come out of Egypt, and he brings his daughter Zipporah, Moshe's wife, and Moshe's two children. And Yitro gives him advice as to how to judge the people. And the Torah actually spends a substantial amount of time on it. And then it goes right into what's called the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. There's really only two incidences in the Parsha. We're going to concentrate on the Ten Commandments tonight. But we're going to do it in like a little different of a way, because we're going to just take the first Rashi in the Parsha, which seems to have nothing to do with the Ten Commandments, and we're going to see how actually it is connected. So what is it? How does the Parsha begin? Vayishma Yitro Kohen Midian Choten Moshe et kol asher asa Elokim leMoshe uleYisrael Amo ki hotzi Hashem et Yisrael miMitzrayim. And Yitro heard, and Yitro, the priest of Midian, heard. Now, Hebrew you have to translate differently. Pardon me. Yitro, the priest of Midian, the father-in-law of Moshe, heard all that God had done to Moshe and Israel, his people, when God brought Israel out of Egypt. So the first thing that Rashi asks is, what did he hear? It says, Vayishma Yitro et kol asher asa Elokim, everything that God had done. Okay, so we would think it would for sure mention the 10 plagues. I mean, like, if it's everything that God had done. But Rashi asks the question. He says, Ma shemua shemav uba, what did he hear that caused him to come? Apparently he heard all about them going out of Egypt. So Rashi says, Kriyat Yamsuf u'milchemet Amalek. He says he heard about the splitting, well, it doesn't even say, he just heard about, the splitting of the Red Sea and the war with Amalek. And it doesn't mention the 10 plagues at all. So there's a lot of commentary why these two things are mentioned. And this is something that we're not going to go into, but there is a disagreement whether this parsha here happens before the giving of the Torah or after the giving of the Torah. And that's why Rashi's commentary is significant, because we would think, we could kind of tell where Rashi is holding, because we would think that if Rashi held that Yitro came after the giving of the Torah, then why didn't he hear about the giving of the Torah? Rashi doesn't mention that. So that leads us to believe that Rashi feels that he came before. But I'm just mentioning this as an aside, because I was learning something else about these two things, the splitting of the sea and the war with Amalek. And then I remembered, wow, that's the first thing that Rashi says. That's what Yitro heard. So basically, I'm going to try to give over this whole Torah that I prepared. And only in the end, actually, are we going to plug it back into this Rashi to try to understand Rashi's question. What did he hear that caused him to come? According to tradition, Yitro is like the convert. He's the paradigm of the convert. So much so that he has the merit that the giving of the Ten Commandments is in his parsha.
Here not yet.
What?
Here not yet. Here he is not yet a convert.
Yeah. But what Rashi is saying, what aroused him, what inspired him to want to come and join the Jewish people? That's really what it means. That Yitro heard. Here, this is like heard is like Shema Yisrael. Not just listen, but understand Israel. That's what Shema means here, is understand Israel. So Yitro understood something from the splitting of the sea and the war with Amalek. But only at the end are we going to plug back almost an independent Torah. The Torah I'm going to give over now is, in a sense, independent of this. But I just found it very intriguing that it fits perfectly in here. So we're going to jump to the very beginning of the account of the receiving of the Torah. It's on page 400 in the Art Scroll, the 19th chapter, the first verse. So now begins the account of receiving the Torah. B'chodesh hashlishi, letzet b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim, b'yom hazeh ba'u midbar Sinai. So it says that it was in the third month, and what's implied here is on the first day of the third month, from their coming out of Egypt. On this day, they came to the desert of Sinai. And then it says, V'yisu miRefidim v'yavo'u midbar Sinai. And they traveled from Refidim, that's where they fought Amalek. And they came to the desert of Sinai. V'yachanu b'midbar, and they camped in the midbar. Now notice that the word v'yachanu is in the plural. They camped as it should be. They camped in the midbar. But then it says, Vayichan Sham Yisrael neged Ahar. And then it says, and Israel camped across from the mountain. But here, the word for camped is in the singular. So this is an obvious, like red lights are going off. Like why? Just a few words apart. First it's plural, and then it's singular. So this is one of the most well-known Rashis in the whole Torah, is commenting on this. So if you look in the Rashi, he says, a very famous statement. Ki'ish echad b'leiv echad. Aval shar kol hachaniyot b'tarumot u'b'machloket. He says, why does it say they camped in the singular? Because they were like one person with one heart. But then he says, but all the rest of the encampments in the desert were full of problems and disagreements. So in other words, there was something unique happening here. There was some kind of a unity of purpose, so much so that the Torah takes the word vayachanu, and they camped, and writes it in the singular. And this expression from Rashi is quoted endlessly as the ultimate ideal for the Jewish people, and let's say ultimately the world. Ki'ish echad b'leiv echad, like one person with one heart. So, in my book, I asked the question, well, how did they get to this level? You know, almost what Rashi asks about Yitro. He says, what did Yitro hear? So this question is not the same, it's similar. It's like, what happened that Israel came to the mountain of Sinai like one person with one heart? There's no outward explanation of how that happened. Rashi just says that's the way it was. And most people leave the Rashi at that. They came unified. But the question is, how? So the way I answered it is, and now you'll see why I jumped on this first Rashi, is there are two things that happened that prepared them to be in this headspace. The first one was Kriyat Yam Suf. Because after they crossed the Yam, so we're told, this is just last week's Parsha, we're told that all of Israel sang. And the Midrash says that what the simplest handmaiden saw at the sea was greater than what Ezekiel saw in his vision of the chariot, which is perhaps the most mystical section of the entire Tanakh, which we read as the Haftorah on the first day of Shavuos. Well, in Israel, there is only one day. So obviously, what happened at Kriyat Yam Suf is like everyone experienced a prophetic experience greater than Yechezkel, greater than Ezekiel. So then the question is, how did that happen? Through the singing. Right? Through the experience of the singing, they became Ki'ish echad b'leiv echad. And that's why it's one of the 10 archetypal songs sung throughout history. And why the Midrash says this astounding thing, that everyone had visions greater than what's called Ma'aseh Merkavah, greater than the chariot. But what was the vehicle? What was the chariot? The music, the singing. And I think everyone can understand that. Anyone who has experienced music in a deep way, especially with other people, and it could be in a Beit Knesset, it could be in tefillah, it could have been around a campfire, it could have been at a concert, but where the music just unifies the consciousness of everyone there, because everyone's plugged into the music, mentally plugged into the music. And it creates a feeling of Ki'ish echad b'leiv echad. So remember, this is just to answer, how did we get to camp at Sinai as one person with one heart? So the first thing is this experience at the sea. What is the second one? The war with Amalek. How did they become one in through warfare? So this is something that anyone who's been in Israel during any of the wars, or Chas v'shalom, after a terrorist attack, or some kind of national tragedy, knows how the day before, people could have been like ready to have fist fights in the Knesset, but as soon as war breaks out, Chas v'shalom, like all the differences just fade away, and everyone unites in a single purpose. Israel has gone through this. I don't know if there's any other country that has had so many wars. I mean, there were, like in Europe, there was the 100-Year War, but these are different wars. Like you finish a war, and then like 2 or 3 or 4 years later, there's another war. So in the war with Amalek, to defeat Amalek, the people had to be united. They had to have been of one mind, of one purpose. So both of these incidences lead up to them coming to the desert of Sinai on the 1st of Sivan, and they came like one person with one heart. So it's a very deep way to understand what is this well-known Rashi, which he doesn't flesh out for us. We have to think of the implications ourselves as to how they reach that. So I'm actually going to do a little bit differently. I was going to save the whole thing of Yitro to the end, but I'm going to plug him in right now. So now we can understand, what did Yitro hear? He heard about these two same things. So if we look at the Rashi very superficially, it's like, oh, there was a miracle at the Yam, and they defeated this, formidable enemy, Amalek. I think I want to be part of them. But must have been more than that. What Yitro heard, meaning what he understood, is he heard or plugged in to this sense of unity that he heard they reached at the crossing of the sea and the war with Amalek. And that is what turned him on. This, I want to be part of. I want to be part of this.
Could it also be that he related to the Kriyat Yamsuf on the level of rebirth, and that he was in some sense looking for that in himself, and that also?
Okay, so what we do now is I have to repeat the question, because those people who are watching can't hear the question. So we have a question that maybe in addition to what I said, perhaps Yitro was connecting to the theme of rebirth that going through the Yam represents. And the answer would be absolutely. Definitely would be part of it. We've talked many, many times that the parable of coming out of Egypt is the 10 plagues are the birth pangs. The splitting of the water is when a woman's waters break in preparation to give birth. The going through the sea is the baby going through the birth canal. Coming to the other side is the baby coming out into the world. So we could say, yes, Yitro, that might have also been a factor in his what he heard, what he understood, that this is a newborn people, and I want to be a part of it. But now let's take this idea, and we have to run with it. The Art Scroll and the Slow Number Rebbe, they both say a very similar thing when discussing the various 10 archetypal songs. And they want to understand, what does it mean that a song becomes one of the 10 archetypal songs? Like, what are the ingredients? What are the stipulations to... I mean, there have been billions of songs sung. There's 150 psalms, and only one of them was included in one of these songs. So we see that in almost every case, the songs that are chosen are songs that represent a transition and either by an individual or all of Israel, a unified sense of purpose, which is like a symphony. Let's say a symphony has 100 instruments. If anyone's heard a symphony tune up, right? It sounds like cacophony. It's like no one's playing together. Everyone's just tuning up their instruments. So it doesn't sound like music at all. But then when they, launch into the symphony, then it all comes together. So that's the idea of an archetypal song. An archetypal song is when national purpose comes together, or an individual's purpose comes together. Let's say for Hannah sang when she gave birth to Shmuel, and her song was prophecy, but it's because she made the transition from being childless to having a child, and we know the story of Hannah. That was like the purpose of her whole life. So when she reached the fulfillment of the purpose of her life, then she could sing. And when they crossed the sea, so this represented the final leaving of Egypt. That was it. Only when they got to the other side and they realized the miracle, and they realized we're really out now. There's no turning back, and they're not going to come after us. So it was the culmination of the transition and the culmination of the fulfillment of purpose. So we see that in both the singing of the song at the sea and fighting the war of Amalek, what brought them to this state of K'ish Echad B'Lev Echad. First we said it was the music, and then we said it was the danger. But if you go one step deeper, they both have to do with purpose. Because each one hooked them in to a sense of mission, of purpose, of something so much greater than themselves. And so we want to explore that in relationship to the Ten Commandments now. So, first of all, I can't go into as much detail as I would like because of time restraints, but there are many, many different midrashim and hints to the connection between the creation of the world and the giving of the Torah. Many, many different connections. The most obvious is there are 10 expressions through which God created the world, 10 mamarot, and God said, and God said, and God said 10 times. And the fact that there are 10, in Hebrew, they're not called really the 10 Commandments. They're the Aseret HaDibrot. They're really sayings. So that connects, because both of them, creation and the giving the Torah, was through speech. And of course, we've discussed many, many times the other links of 10, the 10 tests of Avraham, the 10 plagues, and how they're all connected, the 10 sphirot. They're all connected. Yes, that we'll get to. So, we want to make a very, very strong connection between the giving the Torah and the creation of the world. And the Rashi that puts it together better than any of them is back in Bereshit at the first Shabbat on the words Yom HaShishi, which we include in Kiddush. That's how we begin Kiddush. Yom HaShishi, Vayachulu Hashemayim V'aretz V'kol Tzva'am. And it was at Vayhi Erev, Vayhi Voker, Yom HaShishi. It was evening and it was morning, the sixth day. So Rashi asks, wait a minute, it doesn't say Vayhi Erev, Vayhi Boker, Yom HaSheni. It was evening, it was morning, the sixth day, the second day. Ha-shlishi, ha-revi'i, ha-chamishi. Doesn't say have the letter Hey before each of the days, second, third, fourth, fifth, but the sixth it does. It says Yom Ha-shishi, which we can interpret as the sixth day with a big capital T. The sixth day. So Rashi says, why is this? So he says, because it alludes to another sixth day. The 6th of Sivan, on which the Torah was given. And then Rashi says an amazing thing. He says, it was as if all of creation was hanging in the balance, or al tanai. It was on condition that Israel would receive the Torah at Sinai on the 6th of Sivan. So Rashi connects that the whole creation was on condition that Israel would receive the Torah in Sinai. This connects to the very first Rashi. It's not the very first Rashi, but on the first verse of Rashi. Rashi says, Bereshit. He says, don't read it in the beginning. Read it bishvil, for the sake of the bet of Bereshit. Bereshit means beginning or first. Be means in. The Rashi says, don't read it in. Read the be like bishvil, for the sake of Torah, which is called the first of my ways, and for the sake of Israel, which is called the first of my produce. Again, Rashi connects Torah and Israel. And then in Yom HaShishi, he connects the creation of the world, which is for Torah, on condition that Israel receives it on the 6th of Sivan. So Rashi is going like this, between creation and the Ten Commandments. I learned from Rav Ginsburg that the sentence preceding the Ten Commandments, Vayidaber Elokim et kol hadavarim ha'ela le'mor, is 7 words and 28 letters, which is the exact same construct as Reshit bara Elokim et Shemaim et Haaretz. 7 words and 28 letters. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The 7 words and 28 letters. And the introductory sentence to the Ten Commandments is the same construct. And they're both Elokim. Bereshit bara Elokim and Vayidaber Elokim. So the Mamarot is Vayomer Elokim 10 times. And here it's Vayidaber Elokim. So there's this connection between creation and the giving of the Ten Commandments. On the verse that we read, it was on the 3rd month, on the first day, when Bnei Yisrael came to the desert of Sinai. It says, B'yom hazeh, on this day. So Rashi says, grammatically, it should have said in Hebrew, on that day. On this day doesn't really work grammatically so good. It should be on that day. So he says, so why does it say on this day? To teach you that Torah should be as new to you today as if it was given today. By Yom Hazeh, the Torah is given today. It wasn't a one-time occurrence. And what do we say about the creation? The same thing. Creation was not a one-time occurrence. It happens at every second. And as we've learned many times, at every split second. So here's another deep connection between the giving of the Torah, which Rashi says should be new to you every day, as if it's given today,